Thank you for joining this virtual presentation of the Oregon Board of Pharmacy's Pharmacist in Charge, or PIC, training program. The program you are participating in today was last revised in April of 2024. This training is designed to provide you with an overview of the Oregon Board of Pharmacy, statutes, and rules that pertain to the responsibilities of a pharmacist in charge. Please note that all licensees must comply with all state and federal laws and rules governing the practice of pharmacy, which includes ensuring that the pharmacy you work for is in compliance with all state and federal rules governing the practice of pharmacy. It is important to note that while we strive to keep this training current with applicable laws and rules, you are ultimately responsible for following the most current and effective laws and rules. In any instance where there's a conflict between the information presented here and the effective laws and rules, the laws and rules take precedence. The Oregon Board of Pharmacy serves to promote and protect public health, safety, and welfare by ensuring high standards in the practice of pharmacy and through effective regulation of the manufacture and distribution of drugs. Our vision is that all Oregonians have equitable access to medication and pharmacy services provided safely and conveniently through a network of highly skilled and dedicated pharmacist interns and pharmacy technicians, along with a well-regulated manufacturing and distribution network. Our values are equity, service, safety, adaptability, professionalism, integrity, and accountability. These values reflect both how the board and agency staff strive to conduct ourselves and the behaviors the board seeks to instill across the practice of pharmacy in Oregon. Upon completion of all three modules, participants should be able to interpret Oregon statutes and rules related to the pharmacist in charge, describe the foundational responsibilities of a state board of pharmacy, explain how the board conducts inspections, investigations, and issues disciplinary actions, develop policies and procedures to assure regulatory compliance of the pharmacy, comply with reporting requirements, supervise interns, certified Oregon pharmacy technicians, and pharmacy technicians consistent with applicable requirements of state law. Implement policies and procedures for your pharmacy services that comply with state and federal laws. This training program is divided into three modules and will provide an overview of the following key areas. In Module 1, you'll learn about the board, an overview of the board, agency staff, and board meetings. We'll also discuss the qualifications of the pharmacist in charge and any limitations on the PIC's role and the core responsibilities a PIC undertakes. We'll delve into the policies and procedures that are required for your pharmacy. We'll also explore the proper record-keeping practices and documentation standards. In Part 2, we'll go over inspections and investigations. PIC should be prepared for potential inspections and investigations, and we'll outline the procedures and expectations during such events. Then in Module 3, we'll go over current topics. The pharmacy landscape is constantly evolving. We'll discuss some of the current topics that are relevant to the practice of pharmacy in Oregon. We'll also provide you with a list of valuable resources to help you navigate your PIC duties effectively. In order to earn the PIC training program certificate, participants must watch the entire training program, which is all three modules, and complete an online learning assessment and program evaluation. Information on how to do this will be provided at the end of Module 3. Now, we're going to go over the basics of the board. To get started, let's get to know the board a little better. First, we're going to talk about board members. Oregon Board of Pharmacy consists of 9 board members. 5 members are licensed pharmacists, 2 are licensed pharmacy technicians, and 2 are representatives of the public. Board members are volunteers. The governor appoints each member of the board for a term of 4 years, and appointees are subject to confirmation by the state Senate. Board members may be reappointed, and while there is no longer a statutory term limit, it has customarily been limited to 2 terms. Qualifications for board membership can be found in Oregon Revised Statutes, Chapter 689-115. To qualify as a pharmacist member, a person must be at the time of appointment an Oregon resident, be licensed in good standing to practice pharmacy in the state, be engaged in the practice of pharmacy in Oregon, and have at least 5 years' experience in practice of pharmacy in Oregon. To qualify as a technician member, a person must be at the time of appointment an Oregon resident, licensed and in good standing to perform the duties of a pharmacy technician in the state, and be engaged in the performance of duties of a pharmacy technician in the state. They must also have at least 3 years of experience in performing the duties of a pharmacy technician in this state after they became licensed. To qualify as a public member, a person must be at least 18 years old, must not be a current or former member or have had any financial interest in the pharmacy profession, must not have current or past material financial interest in providing pharmacy services, and must not have engaged in the activity directly related to the practice of pharmacy. The public member must not be the spouse, domestic partner, child, parent, or sibling of a pharmacist. Any qualified Oregon citizen may apply for the public member position. For more information, you should see ORS 689-115. And for additional resources, including how to apply, visit the Oregon.gov Boards and Commissions website. The time commitment as a board member is significant. Board meetings are usually 2 to 3 consecutive days, 6 times per year, and meetings are typically held Wednesday through Friday. It's important that members attend all board meetings. A member will be removed immediately from the board after missing 3 consecutive meetings if not excused. Preparing for each board meeting requires reviewing compliance case documents and other materials, which may take 30 hours or more per meeting. Occasionally, emergency or special meetings are held, which may require additional preparation. Board members may periodically travel to conferences within Oregon and around the United States. Board members are eligible to receive a per diem for official board business unless they are employed in full-time public service. The per diem rate is established by the Oregon legislature. Board members are eligible for reimbursement of expenses incurred for board business, such as mileage reimbursement. Next up, let's discuss agency staff. Agency staff are employed by the state of Oregon. There are approximately 20 staff members at the Board of Pharmacy, divided into 3 main groups. The first group is licensing. This team includes a director and licensing representatives who process applications for over 20 different outlet types and for individual licensees, such as pharmacy technicians, certified Oregon pharmacy technicians, interns, and pharmacists. The primary responsibilities of this team include reviewing and processing of all applications and initial communications with applicants, reviewing and renewing of all license and registration types, processing all accounts receivable in the agency's licensing database, serving as the first point of contact for all callers and agency inquiries. The second group is compliance. This team includes a director, coordinator, secretary, chief compliance officer, and compliance officers who conduct investigations and inspections. The primary responsibilities of this team include planning and conducting inspections and investigations of various licensees or people, and registrants, which are places, drug outlets, wholesalers, manufacturers, and the like. They also investigate violations of the Oregon Revised Statutes and Oregon Administrative Rules and federal regulations. Investigating complaints, evaluating findings, preparing and presenting compliance investigative reports. They write draft disciplinary orders, participate in contested case hearings. They provide technical information to inquiries from licensees and the public, and provide educational outreach via weekly phone duty assignments. And the third group is operations. This team leads the operations of the agency and includes the executive director, administrative director, pharmacy consultant, operations manager, office manager, and an executive support specialist. The primary responsibilities of this team include managing budgets, securing funding, and efficiently allocating resources, overseeing the quality of agency programs, ensuring compliance, and gathering feedback, hiring, developing, evaluating, and retaining a competent workforce, setting priorities, developing policies, analyzing needs, prioritizing programs. They represent the agency and the board to the public and other interested parties. They schedule board meetings and handle the logistics, complying with all state and federal laws, such as the Criminal Justice Information System and records retention. As I mentioned, board meetings occur about every other month, so 6 times per year. The meeting agenda and meeting materials are posted on the board's website 2 weeks prior to the board meeting. Interested parties who have signed up to receive notices will receive a GovDelivery email notification. Meeting summaries with video recordings from each public meeting are posted on the website 3 to 4 weeks after a meeting. Board of Pharmacy meetings are conducted in accordance with the Oregon Public Meetings Law. Under this law, governing body meetings are open to the public except as otherwise provided by law, such as when reviewing investigations, legal advice, or personnel issues. The presiding officer, who is the board president, has the authority to keep order and to impose any reasonable restrictions necessary for the efficient and orderly conduct of the meeting. Governing bodies are authorized by ORS 192660 to meet in closed or executive session in certain limited situations as mentioned previously. All official actions by the board must be taken by public vote in open session, and the vote of each member must be recorded. The first day of a board meeting is primarily held in executive session, which is closed to the public. During executive session, the board may receive legal guidance from the Assistant Attorney General from the Oregon Department of Justice, and they review compliance cases. During the executive session, the board cannot discuss board policy or make any decisions. All votes arising from the executive session discussions must be held in a public session. Members of the press may attend executive session, but cannot report the details of the deliberations. The second and often third day of the board meeting is open for public attendance. During open session, the board receives updates from agency staff, discusses policy directives, and reviews proposed new and revised Oregon administrative rules, and votes on compliance cases that were discussed during the executive session. There's also a time for public comment at each meeting. Information on how to sign up for public comment is included on the meeting agenda. The Oregon Board of Pharmacy regulates both people via licensure and places via registration. On this slide are listed the pharmacy licensure and registration types. The Board of Pharmacy is unique among health regulatory boards in that it not only regulates the people, but it also regulates the places that distribute, dispense, or deliver drugs. For people, the board licenses pharmacists, preceptors, interns, certified Oregon pharmacy technicians, and pharmacy technicians. For places, the board registers any entity that dispenses, delivers, or distributes drugs within the state. This includes manufacturers, wholesalers, distribution agents like delivery couriers and transportation companies. Pharmacies make up a small portion of the outlets that are registered by the board. The largest category of registrants is actually non-prescription drug outlets. These outlets are found anywhere an over-the-counter drug is sold in the state. So this pretty much includes every mini-mart, gas station, grocery store, or dollar store. They are registered with the board as non-prescription drug outlets. Now let's move into some regulatory basics. We're going to take a high-level look at the laws and rules that govern the practice of pharmacy. First, there are federal laws that govern the practice of pharmacy in every state. These can be found in the United States Code, or USC, and are enacted by Congress and signed into law by the President. Examples of USCs that apply to pharmacy are 21 USC, which contains the Controlled Substances Act and the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. The Drug Supply Chain Security Act is also contained within 21 U.S.C. The Code of Federal Regulations, or CFRs, are enacted by federal agencies such as the Food and Drug Administration and the Drug Enforcement Administration. For example, 21 CFR Section 1300 until the end contains the regulations related to the DEA. There are also state laws that govern the practice of pharmacy in Oregon. These are found in the Oregon Revised Statutes, or ORS, and are enacted by the state legislature and signed into law by the governor. The chapters of ORS that apply to pharmacy are ORS 689, related to pharmacists and drug outlets and drug sales, and ORS 475, which is related to controlled substances, illegal drug cleanup, miscellaneous drugs, paraphernalia, precursors. The Oregon Administrative Rules, or OARs, are enacted by state agencies like the Board of Pharmacy. OAR 855 contains the rules enacted by the Board of Pharmacy. Other OAR chapters contain rules enacted by other state agencies, like the Oregon Medical Board and OAR 847, and the Oregon Health Authority and OAR 333 and OAR 410. In some cases, the board will adopt an outside standard by reference in the OARs. Board rules adopt specific USCs and CFRs, and even standards set by the United States Pharmacopoeia, or USP, which is a private standard-setting organization. Incorporation by reference, as the process is called, occurs when a state agency adopts a government rule or other published standard that, in effect, says that it is adopting a federal law or private standard as written, and making it legally binding in the state. For example, USP Chapter 795 on non-sterile compounding and USP Chapter 797 on sterile compounding are standards that have been adopted by reference in OAR 855 and are enforceable in the state for the version that is stated in the rule. Board of Pharmacy laws are written and enforced under the area of law called administrative law. Other major areas of law are called civil law and criminal law. The process of a bill becoming a law in Oregon starts with an idea from a citizen or group. A legislator then sponsors the bill and ensures it is drafted correctly. The bill goes through a series of readings, committee reviews, and votes in both the House and the Senate before reaching the governor's desk for final approval. Here is the rulemaking process in a nutshell. An initiating event, such as a newly adopted Oregon state law or an ongoing problem, is identified. In step 2, agency staff will analyze the issue. This includes research, potentially convening a work group with interested parties, and gathering data about the issue. Agency staff draft proposed rules based on the analysis and presents the rules during a board meeting, where the board discusses the rules in an open session. They provide consensus for staff for further edits when applicable. The board then votes to send the proposed rules to a rulemaking hearing. Agency staff file the proposed rules with the Secretary of State and publicly notice to interested parties. The public comment period is open, and the public may provide comment on the proposed rules before they are adopted. After a rulemaking hearing, the board reviews any public comments received during the open comment period and discusses and considers adopting the rules permanently. If the board reaches consensus, they can vote to permanently adopt the rules. Permanent rules are then filed with the Secretary of State, and notices provided to interested parties, as well as licensees and registrants and lawmakers as required by law. There are two primary ways for people to provide feedback on proposed or existing rules. For rules that are currently in rulemaking, step 5, interested parties are encouraged to submit comments and questions on proposed rules, either in writing by emailing their comments to pharmacy.rulemaking@bop.oregon.gov, or by signing up to provide oral testimony during a rulemaking hearing. Instructions, deadlines, and other information related to the hearing are located on the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking located on our rulemaking page. Only comments received during the open comment period are included in the rulemaking hearing report that's provided to the board at the next scheduled board meeting. For existing rules that are not currently in rulemaking, interested parties may provide comments and questions via email at pharmacy.rulemaking@bop.oregon.gov. The agency recognizes that it is useful to have a mechanism to accept submissions of any information related to Chapter 855 of Oregon Administrative Rules that may be unrelated to the specific issues and rules addressed in the rules notice for a rulemaking hearing. The agency does not respond to questions or requests regarding issues or rules sent to this email address, but staff will review the information submitted and forward correspondence to the board. I just discussed new rules and rule changes that are mandated by legislation. Now let's look at rules driven by the board's strategic direction. In August 2023, the board adopted 90 new rules that took effect on March 1st, 2024. This accomplishment represents over a year of work, along with multiple reviews and public comment opportunities. The revisions align with the board's 2022 to 2026 strategic plan. Specifically, the board's priorities of licensing and registration, clarifying categories to ensure proper licensing and drug outlet registration, regulation, systematically refreshing and standardizing rules for improved clarity, compliance, and longevity, and technicians, defining the regulatory framework for pharmacist-technician collaboration to enhance safety, access, service, and efficiency. With all the licensee rules now refreshed and standardized, the work will shift to outlet types. The initial focus will be on facilities like wholesalers, manufacturers, third-party logistics, and drug distributors, alongside an in-depth revision of Division 41 related to pharmacies. In 2024, it is expected that the board will adopt a new strategic plan for the years of 2024 to 2029. And with that plan will come new goals with new directives related to rule writing. As mentioned on the last slide, via strategic planning, the board has directed agency staff to update all of the rules contained in OAR 855. As a result, the board is in the midst of a major overhaul of its rules. This means you can expect significant updates over the next few years, especially regarding outlets and license types. Here's what's happening. The board is revamping the entire rule structure. New rules will be numbered in the 100s and organized in a more logical way. Definitions will now come first, followed by key board information like procedures, policies, and fees. A dedicated divisions for public health emergencies will come next, as these rules modify licensee and outlet rules when a public health emergency is in effect. Next up, clearer divisions have been created for different license types, registration types, making it easier to find the relevant rules. Then, each type of outlet, retail pharmacy, institutional pharmacy, for example, will have its own designated division. And finally, non-pharmacy outlets, like manufacturers and wholesalers, will have updated rules. It's important to note that this is still a work in progress. The final structure and numbering of divisions may change before all of the new rules are finalized. You should keep an eye on the board website and communications for updates on the rule revision process. As the new rules roll out, there may be adjustments needed to your operations and procedures. Stay informed and be ready to adapt. The rules in italics on this slide have already been revised, and the rules in bold are currently being revised. Now, let's start with some basic concepts. Let's look at the definitions in Oregon Revised Statutes, or ORS 689005. A pharmacist means an individual licensed by the state to engage in the practice of pharmacy or to engage in the practice of clinical pharmacy. An intern means a person who is enrolled in or has completed a course of study at a school or college of pharmacy approved by the board and who is licensed with the board as an intern. A pharmacy technician means a person licensed by the State Board of Pharmacy who assists the pharmacist in the practice of pharmacy pursuant to the rules of the board. It's essential to understand that only a pharmacist can engage in the practice of pharmacy. An intern who is supervised by a pharmacist may engage in the practice of pharmacy when permitted by the supervising pharmacist. And while crucial to the process, a technician is not permitted to engage in the practice of pharmacy, but they can assist a pharmacist who is engaging in the practice of pharmacy. To make sure your policies regarding the utilization of pharmacists and non-pharmacists are compliant with Oregon regulations, let's look at a few more basic concepts. In Oregon, only a pharmacist can engage in the practice of pharmacy, and that's defined in ORS 689005. In paren A, talks about the interpretation and evaluation of prescriptions. That is the practice of pharmacy. This critical task ensures that patients receive the right medication at the right dosage. By law, only a pharmacist is authorized to interpret and evaluate prescriptions. An intern may interpret and evaluate as permitted by their supervising pharmacist, and a technician may assist the pharmacist in interpreting and evaluating by performing data entry of a prescription into the pharmacy software. A pharmacist is responsible for verifying that the technician's work is accurate and that the patient receives the right medication at the right dosage. Next, let's look at paren B, compounding, dispensing, and labeling. That's the practice of pharmacy. From mixing personalized medications to applying accurate labels, these steps safeguard patient safety and medication effectiveness. Only a pharmacist is authorized to compound, dispense, and label drugs. An intern may compound, dispense, and label as permitted by their supervising pharmacist. A technician may assist the pharmacist in compounding, dispensing, and labeling. A pharmacist is responsible for verifying that the technician's work is accurate and that the patient receives the right medication that is properly labeled. Now let's look at paren J, patient care services. Beyond dispensing medications, pharmacists actively manage medication therapy, assess risk, and provide comprehensive medication reviews. Only a pharmacist can provide patient care services such as MTMs or CMRs. An intern who has completed their first academic year may provide these services as permitted by their supervising pharmacist. And a technician can assist the pharmacist in these activities by obtaining a medication history so that the pharmacist can perform medication reconciliation. Please remember, the dividing line is clear. Any task requiring judgment, independent decision-making, or direct patient interaction falls within the practice of pharmacy and must be performed by the pharmacist or an intern as permitted by the supervising pharmacist. Technicians support these activities under the pharmacist's supervision, but cannot independently engage in them. Every step in dispensing a medication, from interpretation to the actual dispensing, must involve the pharmacist's oversight and verification to ensure patient safety and optimal care. Before I go on to the next slide, note that in paren I, the practice of pharmacy includes the optimizing of drug therapy through the practice of clinical pharmacy. This practice has a separate definition in law. The practice of clinical pharmacy is defined in ORS 689005 and is part of the practice of pharmacy defined in paren I. In paren A, clinical pharmacy involves a pharmacist working with the patient's other healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, and the like, to optimize medication therapy. The goal is to achieve the best possible health outcomes for the patient using medications effectively and safely. In paren B, pharmacists can provide patient care services beyond dispensing medications. This includes managing chronic conditions after a diagnosis, such as diabetes or high blood pressure. In paren C, the practice of clinical pharmacy can be formalized through a clinical pharmacy agreement with a healthcare provider. The definition of a clinical pharmacy agreement can also be found in ORS 689005, there are not rules specific to clinical pharmacy agreements at this time. Pharmacy technicians are integral to ensuring patient safety and medication accuracy. They assist pharmacists in providing efficient and effective care. This slide focuses on two key organ revised statutes, ORS 689-225 and ORS 689-486. These statutes outline the responsibilities of both the State Board of Pharmacy and licensed pharmacists in overseeing and supervising pharmacy technicians. ORS 689-225 requires the State Board of Pharmacy to establish rules for pharmacy technicians working under the supervision, direction, and control of pharmacists. The law requires that the rules written by the board contain guidelines for adequate supervision of a technician by a pharmacist. ORS 689-486 emphasizes the pharmacist's ultimate responsibility for the pharmacy technician's work. It states, a person licensed to perform the duties of a pharmacy technician may perform the duties of a pharmacy technician only under the supervision, direction, and control of a licensed pharmacist. Supervision means watching over and guiding someone to ensure they are doing things correctly. Direction means telling someone what to do or how to do something. Control means having the power to determine the outcome of someone's actions. In other words, supervision, direction, and control of a technician means that pharmacists are not only responsible for overseeing the technicians, but also for ensuring the accuracy and safety of all medication-related tasks performed under their supervision. As a reminder, an intern is also required to be under the supervision of a licensed pharmacist. This rule, OAR 855-115-0122, outlines the pharmacist's responsibilities related to supervision. In Paren 1, pharmacists can supervise as many certified organ pharmacy technicians or pharmacy technicians as they deem appropriate in their professional judgment to ensure patient health, safety, and well-being. As a reminder, pharmacists must always supervise, direct, and control a technician's work, unless the technician is performing final verification or vaccine administration, which are two tasks that the pharmacist can delegate to technicians, but still require supervision and compliance with applicable rules. Now, for Paren 2, when supervising interns, pharmacists can supervise a maximum of 4 interns directly involved in patient care activities, such as counseling or dispensing medications. Pharmacists can supervise as many interns as they deem appropriate in their professional judgment to ensure the patient's health, safety, and well-being when the interns are engaged in non-direct patient care activities. These might be things like research or administrative tasks, or informational health fairs where interns provide general, non-patient specific information. Additional rules regarding supervision, direction, and control are found in OAR 855-125-0001. Pharmacy technicians or certified organ pharmacy technicians must act in compliance with statutes and rules under the supervision, direction, and control of a pharmacist. OAR 855-125-0105, a certified organ pharmacy technician and pharmacy technician must only assist in the practice of pharmacy under the supervision, direction, and control of a pharmacist, and they must know the identity of the pharmacist who's providing supervision, direction, and control at all times, and they must only work within the scope of duties permitted by the pharmacist who is providing them with supervision, direction, and control. The same language is repeated again in the technician permitted practices in OAR 855-125-0135. Remember that each technician must be able to tell you or identify who is supervising, directing, and controlling them at all times. Board rules also require that any task that requires the reasonable professional judgment of a pharmacist to be verified by a pharmacist. Think about the activities that occur in the pharmacy and ask yourself if the task requires judgment. So with packing, pouring, or placing a drug in a container, the pharmacist must verify that the technician put the right drug, quantity, etc. in that container. With entering information into the computer, the pharmacist must verify the technician entered the information properly. With reconstitution of a medication, the pharmacist must verify the technician is going to utilize the correct amount of water prior to reconstitution. Remember that any judgment made by a technician must always be verified by a pharmacist. Now let's transition to the PIC qualifications, limitations, and responsibilities. Per Oregon Revised Statutes, ORS 689-315, each drug outlet must identify a pharmacist licensed to practice in the state of Oregon who is the pharmacist in charge, or PIC. Then in OAR 855-041-1010, each drug outlet pharmacy must have one pharmacist in charge employed on a regular basis at a location who is responsible for the daily operation of the pharmacy. In the Oregon Administrative Rules, Chapter 855 contains the Board of Pharmacy rules, and Division 115 is about pharmacists. There is a rule section, -205, that lists the qualifications and limitations of the PIC, and a second section, -210, that lists the responsibilities of a pharmacist in charge. Division 41 is about the operation of pharmacies, and a PIC is mentioned over 30 times within this division. So it's important you familiarize yourself with those rules. As new divisions are being created for each specific drug outlet type, there may be customized PIC requirements for that outlet type. As PIC, you are the primary liaison to the board for your outlet, meaning you are usually the first point of contact from the board when information is needed. The board does not usually contact your supervisor or your staff unless they are unable to reach you or the matter concerns your staff or supervisor directly. If agency staff receive complaints concerning your pharmacy, compliance officers will reach out to you as PIC for a response to an alleged complaint regarding your pharmacy. They'll reach out generally by mail, but sometimes they call you or they email you. It is your duty to respond in the time requested and in the manner requested. Remember, this response should be professional and may be used as your formal response to the board. If you need an exception, like you're going to be on vacation and you can't respond by the deadline, contact the compliance officer. Please be aware that as we go through the PIC rules, there is no such thing as an interim PIC. You are either the PIC or you are not the PIC. If your company wants to name you as an interim PIC, then you still need to do all the things a new PIC must do, and you are held accountable to the same degree as any other PIC of record. The board does not have exceptions or allowances in rule for an interim PIC. If you, as the PIC, are not present in the pharmacy, the pharmacist on duty is recognized as the PIC at that time. So, do you qualify to be a PIC? Well, are you a pharmacist licensed in Oregon? Have you completed at least 1 year of pharmacy practice? Or have you completed the PIC training course? Some of you may be taking this training so that when you are asked to be a PIC, you are ready. And there may be some of you who are not currently licensed as a pharmacist and/or who have not completed at least 1 year of pharmacy practice. And then there are likely some of you have been a PIC already and you're taking this class as a refresher. Just remember, in order to be a PIC, you will need to meet the qualifications as they're outlined in OAR 855-115-0205. To prevent overextension and ensure adequate oversight, a pharmacist cannot be designated PIC of more than 3 pharmacies simultaneously. However, this limit does not apply to pharmacy prescription kiosks or lockers that are regulated by different specific OARs. Also, starting July 1st, 2025, all PICs must complete the board-provided PIC training course at least every 5 years to maintain their qualifications. This ongoing education will ensure that PICs stay up to date on regulations, best practices, and evolving legal requirements. Now let's talk about out-of-state or non-resident pharmacies and the PIC duties associated with these locations, as there are a few key differences between an in-state or resident pharmacy PIC and an out-of-state or non-resident PIC. Non-resident pharmacies have 4 months from initial registration to designate a PIC who is licensed in Oregon. If the PIC changes, the non-resident pharmacy must notify the board within 10 business days. If a new PIC is not immediately available, the non-resident pharmacy has 90 days to designate a new Oregon PIC. If they are unable to do so, the pharmacy must cease drug distribution and the provision of pharmacy services in Oregon. In the interim, the pharmacy must notify the board with the identity of a contact person with whom the board can communicate. The non-resident PIC is responsible for all pharmacy services it provides to residents who live in Oregon. The PIC provides supervision, direction, and control in the pharmacy. These non-resident pharmacy PICs must also hold a license to practice pharmacy in the resident state, be present in the pharmacy a minimum of 20 hours per week, and, just like resident pharmacies, they must complete a self-inspection form. However, there's a special self-inspection form for these out-of-state pharmacies called the non-resident PIC self-inspection form. Again, please be aware that as new divisions are created for specific registration types, like telepharmacies or remote dispensing site pharmacies, there may be slightly different PIC responsibilities. Please be sure to look at the rules in the division that applies to your registration type. So when you have a change in PIC, how do you report it? OAR 855-041-1010 requires that each drug outlet pharmacy to report a change in PIC within 15 days of occurrence in the registrant's electronic licensing record with the board. The change in PIC will be completed in this record. It's called eGov. To update your outlet's PIC or consultant pharmacist work email and inspection contact email, you go into the outlet's appropriate eGov account, and using the left-hand menu, you'll select Update License Info and Upload Documents. Then select the appropriate license and click Continue. Using the left-hand menu, select Information Update, and then enter the PIC or consultant email address in the PIC consultant work email field. Enter the person who should be contacted concerning an inspection of the outlet in the outlet inspection contact email box and click Save. Then click Continue on the document upload page. And once all the checklist items have been completed, click Continue, or in the left-hand menu, select Finish. Review the information on the summary page to confirm that everything is correct, and then click on Submit a Attestation. A copy of this update will be added to the board's licensing file. You should also log into your personal eGov profile to update or verify that your contact information is accurate. We recommend that you reach out to your employer to ensure that you are able to receive emails from the board at your work email address that is on file with the board. Now let's talk a little bit about rules specific to pharmacists. These regulations, again, are in OAR 855-115, and they're designed to encompass the diverse nature of pharmacy practice in today's world, where pharmacists aren't always confined to brick and mortar stores. These regulations consider situations where pharmacists provide cognitive services even without physical drugs on hand. Therefore, you'll see some responsibilities listed in these rules that you may think are only required of the pharmacist in charge, but they're actually required of every pharmacist, regardless of their practice setting. All pharmacists, regardless of their practice location, are required to adhere to the general responsibility rules in OAR 855-115-0105. This includes things like exercising prudent care and judgment, being accountable for yourself and your team, complying with laws and regulations. In addition, pharmacists must comply with the universal rules for confidentiality and duty to report to make reports related to controlled substances. While everyone in the pharmacy has a responsibility to ensure compliance with all state and federal laws and rules governing the practice of pharmacy, It's important to remember that if a law requires a form to be filled out and submitted, then this needs to be done. It is the PIC's responsibility to ensure it's done, but the form can be filled out by anyone that is allowed by the law that requires the form. An example of this is a DEA 106 form for drug loss. OAR 855-041-1030 states that at the time of the report of a theft or loss of a controlled substance, a DEA Form 106 is sent to the Drug Enforcement Administration. A copy shall be sent to the board. The DEA requires a person authorized by the registrant to complete the form. When it comes to personnel, in OAR 855-115-0120, all pharmacists must oversee, supervise, and train both licensed and non-licensed staff, ensuring they operate within their designated roles per the regulations. I covered the supervision rule earlier, so we're going to skip to the rule on drugs, records, and security. Every pharmacist, regardless of practice setting, must source drugs responsibly, ensure proper drug storage, manage unfit drugs, follow compounding guidelines, protect patient data, document their activities, and report immunization and communicable diseases and vaccine adverse events data as mandated. Let's take a moment to focus on the security of the prescription area. OAR 855-041-1020 states, the pharmacist in charge and each pharmacist while on duty shall be responsible for the security of the prescription area, including provisions for adequate safeguards against theft or diversion of prescription drugs and records for such drugs. And when there is no pharmacist present, the pharmacy shall be secured to prevent entry. All entrances to the pharmacy must be securely locked, and any keys to the pharmacy must remain in possession of the pharmacist in charge and other employee pharmacists as authorized by the pharmacist in charge. When there is no pharmacist present and it is necessary for non-pharmacist employees or owners to have access to the pharmacy, the prescription area must be secured from entry. Please be aware, a non-pharmacist owner cannot have keys to the pharmacy. In OAR 855-115-0130, there are specific requirements for a pharmacist who is practicing pharmacy for a drug outlet, including that the pharmacist on duty is responsible for everything related to the pharmacy, including its management, control, and daily operations. There is a corresponding rule in OAR 855-041-1010 that states that the pharmacist on duty has the autonomy to control each aspect of the practice of pharmacy, including responsibility for the conduct, operation, management, and control of the pharmacy. In OAR 855-041-1170, each drug outlet is required to provide a working environment that protects the health, safety, and welfare of a patient, which includes sufficient personnel, rest periods, meal breaks, time to complete professional duties and responsibilities, and to abide by the pharmacist on duty's decision to shut down services and respond substantively to a pharmacist's concern of insufficient staffing. OAR 855-115-0130 also states that the pharmacist must ensure prescriptions are filled accurately based on a valid relationship between the patient and a medical professional and only for a legitimate medical reason. The pharmacy must ensure that the outlet reports data as required by law, including information on controlled substances and medications used in death with dignity. And finally, we've come to the rule about responsibilities of the pharmacist in charge. OAR 855-115-0210 lists out the responsibilities of the PIC. The PIC cannot be a passive figurehead. They must actively participate in pharmacy activities, demonstrate leadership and involvement in day-to-day operations. They cannot solely rely on remote management. They must be physically present at the pharmacy on a regular basis, spending sufficient time to fulfill their responsibilities effectively. PIC assumes the ultimate responsibility for the entire pharmacy's conduct, operation, management, and control. You may recall from earlier that any pharmacist working in a drug outlet is responsible for the daily conduct, operation, and management of control of the pharmacy, but the PIC is responsible for its ongoing conduct. While all pharmacists share core responsibilities that we discussed on the last slide, the PIC of a drug outlet pharmacy in Oregon shoulders additional duties to ensure a safe and compliant practice. Here are the additional duties that are listed in OAR 855-115-0210. The PIC must create, maintain, and enforce written policies and procedures that govern how pharmacy is practiced within the drug outlet. These policies must comply with all relevant federal and state laws and regulations, ensuring the pharmacy operates ethically and legally. PIC must maintain complete and accurate records of all pharmacy operations. This includes documenting everything from medication dispensing to patient interactions. The PIC must establish and maintain a continuous quality improvement program for the pharmacy. As PIC, if an inspection of your pharmacy identifies any issues, you must develop a plan to correct those issues, outlining specific steps to address them, and submit the plan within the time frame that's allowed by the board. You must also conduct a thorough review of your pharmacy's operations every year by July 1st, using the current self-inspection form that's applicable to your outlet type to ensure a comprehensive assessment of all critical areas. The self-inspection form must also be completed within 15 days of becoming PIC. As PIC, you're responsible for ensuring accurate and consistent inventory counts of controlled substances. This involves conducting physical counts and reconciling any discrepancies with records. Here are some specific timeframes. For all controlled drugs, within 15 days of a change in PIC, you must do an inventory at least one, and then you must also do an inventory at least once every 367 days to maintain ongoing control. For Schedule II controlled drugs, you must do an inventory every 93 days in a retail drug outlet and every 31 days in an institutional drug outlet. Remember to conduct your counts either before opening or after closing as required by rule, and to minimize disruptions to pharmacy operations. Inventory must be thoroughly documented with all inventory counts and any discrepancies found. The rule requires discrepancy reconciliation. Discrepancy reconciliation requires a physical count. During the scheduled inventory, the PIC and/or authorized personnel physically count all controlled substances, usually by hand, following the proper procedures to ensure accuracy. Simultaneously, the PIC should review the pharmacy records, including dispensing logs, purchase and transfer information, and waste records. These records will indicate the expected quantity of each controlled substance that should still be on hand. By comparing the physical count to the expected quantity from records, any discrepancies that are identified. This can involve missing drugs, additional drugs not found in records, or inconsistencies with the quantities. All discrepancies, regardless of how small, must be carefully documented in a discrepancy report. This report should include details like date and time of the inventory, specific medication involved, discrepancy amount, any potential causes or observations, initials of personnel involved. Then the PIC is responsible for investigating the cause of each discrepancy. This may involve reviewing security footage, interviewing staff, and performing additional counts. Based on the investigation, corrective actions must be taken to address each issue, such as improving security measures, implementing stricter dispensing procedures, or disciplinary action if personnel were involved in misconduct. Depending on the severity and the cause of the discrepancy, it may need to be reported to the Board of Pharmacy and/or the DEA. In OAR 855-115-0210, as the PIC, you need to establish, maintain, and enforce written policies and procedures to run a compliant pharmacy. If you work for a corporation, then the corporation may create the policies and procedures. It is your job as PIC to make sure the corporate policies and procedures are compliant with the Oregon pharmacy law and to enforce the policies and procedures. As PIC, it is important that you keep up with new and proposed rules. Board of Pharmacy rules only require 1 hour of law per licensed year, so 2 per renewal cycle. And while there are many law CEs available, we suggest that you obtain at least 1 hour from an Oregon-based law CE. The board routinely provides law CE specific to Oregon through local associations and colleges of pharmacy. Rulemaking information is updated regularly on the board's website, and you can also subscribe to rulemaking notices and adoption of rules listservs on the board website. We also encourage you to subscribe to our quarterly newsletter, as it contains information on recent rulemaking and other hot topics. In addition to state laws, as PIC, you will also need to keep up to date on federal laws and rules and standards adopted by reference, such as USP, that affect the practice of pharmacy. As an Oregon agency, our board does not provide CE specific to federal laws and rules. However, you should be able to locate CEs and information about changes at the federal level through various associations and other CE vendors. The drug outlet written policies and procedures must be maintained at the pharmacy and must be available to the board upon request, which usually occurs during an inspection or when investigating a complaint. Take a look at this list. Can you think of a written policy for each of these items at your pharmacy? Do you have a policy on technician utilization? Let's take a quick look at a couple of the required policies. First, let's look at storage of drugs. What is your pharmacy's policy? Does it align with OAR 855-041-1036, which is the drug outlet storage rules? I'll give you a real-life example. Let's say your refrigerator in the pharmacy goes out of range during the night, and you, the PIC, didn't close that night, and you won't be opening the pharmacy in the morning. However, you, as PIC, hold the responsibility for ensuring that the pharmacy has adequate policies, procedures, and training in place in the event of a temperature excursion. The opening pharmacist would be responsible for following those policies, procedures, and training, and quarantining product and determining if the product's safe for continued dispensing. But you as PIC can be held responsible for not training your staff adequately and or ensuring excursions were handled appropriately. You and your outlet or corporation may be held responsible if the policies, procedures, and training in place were not adequate to comply with Oregon's pharmacy laws and rules. Next, let's look at pharmacist supervision, direction, and control of non-pharmacists. We discussed this earlier in the presentation. What is your pharmacy's policy? Does it align with ORS 689-225, ORS 689-486, and the rules in OAR 855-120 for interns and OAR 855-125 for technicians? Number 3, looking at the date, time, and identification of the licensee and the specific activity or function of the person who's performing each step of the dispensing process. What is your policy? How are you documenting this? And finally, what are your pharmacy's policies on pharmacists conducting a DUR and counseling? Of course, you have to have policies for each one of these things. We just wanted to highlight a few of them for your thoughts. Now let's look a little deeper at the rules about proper drug storage. OAR 855-041-1036 lists out those requirements. The rule has 3 distinct sections, going from general to more specific, and then even more specific requirements for vaccines. This slide shows the general requirements. In paren 1A, all drugs must be stored according to the manufacturer's published or USP guidelines. USP guidelines are found in USP 659, package and storage requirements. Starting with paren 2, the rules begin to become more specific to refrigerated or frozen drug products. It is really important to note that in paren 2A, big A, the phrase or as specified by the manufacturer, as manufacturer requirements may be more strict than general guidelines. Any pharmacy with refrigerated or frozen drugs must have a centrally placed, accurate, and calibrated thermometer. So what does calibrated mean? Calibration helps to ensure temperature monitoring equipment maintains the highest level of accuracy. Over time, all monitoring devices, even those that are calibrated, will experience drift, causing the sensors to display inaccurate temperature readings. To ensure your thermometer or data logger is reporting the proper temperature, it must be recalibrated according to the manufacturer's specifications. This is generally every 1 to 2 years. To calibrate a thermometer, its accuracy is tested in a substance with a known temperature. Then the thermometer is adjusted to match that temperature. Typically, the thermometer manufacturer will have you send the device along with its probe to a certified laboratory, where they recalibrate it to National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST standards, and send it back with a new certificate for your facility's records. In parent C, the unit must be dedicated to pharmaceuticals only. No food or drinks can be in the unit. And in parent D, measured continuously and documented either manually twice a day with minimum and maximum and current temperatures, or using an automated system. In addition, your pharmacy must have a monitoring plan. If your drug storage unit or area ever has a temperature excursion, you'll need to be able to provide all the items listed in A through G. Make sure you have documented training for all your pharmacy personnel on your temperature monitoring plan. Everyone should know what to do in the event of a temperature excursion. Be sure that you can easily locate thermometer calibrations, quarterly validations if vaccines are involved, and temperature logs. If an excursion happens, detailed notes of who, what, when, where, and why are required. Who closed that night, who opened the pharmacy the next day, what action each person took, who decided to quarantine the drugs, who was contacted to verify the drug was safe for continued use, and copies of all documentation. Your plan must contemplate what to do in an emergency. Are you to move the drugs to another refrigerator or freezer? Is that unit secure? Where is the unit located? And Paren G requires preventative maintenance and evaluation of your refrigeration and thermometers. These rules apply to all drug storage, not just cold drug storage. So for example, if the temperature in the pharmacy is 90 degrees, that can impact all your drugs. Now moving on to the most strict requirements, those for vaccines in Paren 3. You must follow everything in Paren 2, plus vaccines have to be in the temperature stable sections of the refrigerator, not the doors or the drawers, unless you can prove that the temperature doesn't vary in those spots. The thermometer has to be a buffered probe, such as glycol or glass beads, and be calibrated within plus or minus 5 degrees Celsius. Plus or minus 0.5 degrees Celsius. It must have an exterior door, no dorm fridges, and it must have its own thermostat control, not one thermostat for the fridge and freezer combo. Paren 3D is similar to 2D, except that you must download the data weekly and the system validations must be conducted quarterly. So what is a validation? Validation is documented testing performed under highly controlled conditions, demonstrating that processes, methods, and systems consistently produce results meeting predetermined acceptance criteria. So if you pull your glycol probe out of the refrigerator and place it at room temperature, does your written emergency plan work? Does the alarm go off? Do you receive an automated call or text if that is what your monitoring plan says will happen? Did your electronic recording system record the out-of-range temperature as expected? You are validating that your processes work. Of course, you need to document when you are doing your validations, as your continuous temperature monitoring should show an out of range for that period of time. Make sure you are following your QA plan to avoid temperature excursions. It may include not placing medications at the back of the unit where the intake or output vents are, verifying your temperature history for the past 24 hours every day, or making sure each unit is fully closed before leaving for the night. Some PICs have even chosen to set their temperature range a little bit more stringently, so like 36.5 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit, so they are alerted prior to an actual temperature excursion occurring. They can then avoid the headache of excursion documentation because they deal with the issue prior to the unit going below 35 degrees or over 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Drug storage and temperature monitoring is one of the biggest topics of conversation during inspections. It's often a repeat observation and/or discussion item, generally due to a lack of awareness that an excursion occurred or adequate documentation and follow-up. Starting with the basics. A temperature excursion is a deviation from a given instruction. such as when a product is exposed to temperatures outside of the range that's designated for storage or transport. There have been many board cases as a result of the failure to properly document temperature excursions and quarantine drugs until the excursion is thoroughly researched. The outlet, PIC, and pharmacist on duty have been noticed for proposed disciplinary action by the board to include a civil penalty of $1,000 per violation. Violations can be counted per excursion or per drug, so this can get very costly very quickly. If you have an excursion, do the research. Call the manufacturers and document their responses. Don't just assume it was a short excursion, I'm sure it's fine. Any amount of time out of range for any degree out of range needs to be addressed. Duration and peak and trough temperature matter. Excursions for some drugs is cumulative, so repeated excursions, like multiple nights in a row at 2 a.m. for 20 minutes, may result in the drug being adulterated. In addition to researching, mark the drugs that were exposed so if an additional exposure occurs, you are able to quarantine and assess it properly. Have clear policies and procedures in place to make sure that no excursion is missed. Now let's talk about record keeping and documentation. As PIC, it's important that you ensure your pharmacy retains records and documents that are required by rule. When it comes to record formats and storage, the good news is you have some flexibility. Records can be kept in written or electronic format. Whichever method you choose, make sure they are stored securely. The board also needs to be able to access these records if requested. Generally, most records need to be kept a minimum of 3 years. However, there are some exceptions. Clinical pharmacy records must be retained for 7 years. Training records for immunization administration and protocol and formulary compendia prescribing need to be kept for 6 years. These can also be uploaded to your electronic licensing record with the board. For registrants, also known as pharmacies, there's a slightly different rule for records generated by the pharmacy. These records need to be stored on-site for at least 12 months. After that, they can be moved to a secure off-site location, but you must be able to provide them to the board within 3 business days upon request. In Paren 3, it talks about pharmacists who are practicing pharmacy separate from a registered drug outlet. And in Paren 4, it includes some important exceptions. Even if you've reached the minimum retention period, there are a few situations where you must keep the records longer. If federal law requires you to keep it for a longer retention period, you'll need to keep it for that retention period. If the board is conducting an investigation relevant to your records, you must hold on to them for longer. The board may also directly request you to retain records for a longer period. Remember, following these record retention rules is crucial for maintaining your pharmacist license and your pharmacy's license and ensuring you can comply with board requests. You have now completed Module 1. The program code for this module is Kiwi, like the fruit, K-I-W-I. You will need to select this code on the program quiz and evaluation that's located on the board's PIC website. You don't need to do this quiz until you've completed all 3 modules. Please note that if you would like to receive a PIC training course completion certificate and continuing pharmacy education, again, you'll need to watch all 3 modules, then complete a learning assessment, quiz, and evaluation of the course. Information on how to access the learning assessment quiz and evaluation will be provided at the end of Module 3. If you've thought of a question, we encourage you to email pharmacy.compliance@bop.oregon.gov so the compliance officer on duty can provide you with a complete response to your inquiry. Please remember that agency staff cannot give legal advice and may not be able to answer your question as asked. Thank you, and we'll see you in Module 2.